February board meeting of Ignite CDA. If you'd all please rise and help me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now it's time for public comment. Any public comment, please come forward and state your name and address.
I'm at 6920 North of Glensford Drive here in the city. And I have a couple of questions rather than comments. My first question is that at the last meeting, there was a vote to delete what was classified as semi-permanent and temporary public records. My question is, who decides what fits those categories that so they can be destroyed?
Danielle, you want to take that? We have a legal counsel present. She can help you with that.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Hi there. I'm the agency's legal counsel, Danielle Quaid. And those categories, the agency has a policy which includes the definitions that come straight out of Idaho code for what is included in those different categories of records, and the time frames for when they're destroyed tracks exactly what's in the statute as permissible. So I could direct you to that after the meeting if you'd like, but it's all straight out of Idaho code.
Appreciate that. The semi-permanent public it's kind of a, ooh. You know. And my other question is, and this is a little bit more personal, but I'm curious, do all members of the board reside within the city limits of Coeur d'Alene?
No, they do not.
They do not?
Correct.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comment? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much. It's time for the committee reports. Parking Committee, Commissioner Chapkus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a short report, but the total revenue for January was lower by $10,321. However, we saw growth in passes. For the city passes, currently they're at 224, and that's up from 118 last year. County passes are currently at 72. Last year we were at 46. And the discount passes at McEwen currently stands at 237 passes, higher by 27 from last year. In the garage, we have 305 passes, and that's higher by 56. And lastly, there's just some QR codes that are going to be going on the utility boxes on Sherman when the weather warms up. And this will allow you, when scanned, to access local parking. I think it'll be a big help when they get this completed. And that's all I've got, Mr. Chairman.
So how's the QR code going to work?
You will scan it with your phone,
Yep.
and it will direct you to a website that gives you the parking diagram of the city lots
City
that are
parking
available.
spots?
Not availability at that moment, but where the lots are located.
Will you have an option to pay then via that once you get to that site?
My understanding is no, not at that point, not until you're at the lot.
That'll be good information. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's it.
It's time for Tony Burns, Executive Director's Report.
Chairman, first up is, well, all these issues are regarding the Atlas project, but the first up is RFP number 5 for areas 9, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So I will direct you to the graphic on the screen here. So this kind of orange colored area represents the area for RFP number 5. This is area 9, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
Nice.
The RFP will encourage developers to bid in groups for these areas. So we're proposing that areas 14 and 15 be one group of a bid area that is designed for single-family residential. Areas 9 and 16 would be another group, which is the uses can be single-family residential, townhomes, or duplexes. 18 and 19 would be another group, which would also allow for single-family residential, townhomes, and duplexes. And then area 17 would be by itself, which is single-family residential. Now, an organization or a development team can bid on all of these areas if they so choose in one fell swoop. But we would like these other areas to be kind of grouped together. And the reason for this is for kind of ease of A&E DDA kind of management from our standpoint, as well as for design harmony and design consistency. So we wouldn't want somebody to pick up area 14 and someone else pick up area 15, and this kind of development design is way different than what might be rent next door. So we're trying to look for some type of consistency. The developer proposals would be due on April 29th, and we would hopefully have board awards by the end of May. Entertain any questions you might have? Yes.
Commissioner Mandel?
Will we be using the same channels to release the RFP? I know that sometimes the response rate and capacity issues that some of the developers have faced have just limited participation. Are we casting the net the same way we have before or more widely?
We continue to increase the net capacity. We keep adding to the distribution list and to the awareness of the development community. So it is regional based. It doesn't go far back east, but we do capture, the Intermountain West and the West Coast, as well as local. We advertise in the paper.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Tony? Need a motion to
Yes, sir.
accept the RFP and get it out?
I'll make a motion to accept the RFP number 5 for areas 9, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, that motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next on the agenda is the Atlas Waterfront Association, Inc. Amendment to Bylaws. I bring forward to you tonight a proposed amendment to Section 4.1 of the Atlas Waterfront Association Bylaws that provides that the Board of Directors shall consist of a minimum of 3 directors and a maximum of 5 directors. The current version of Section 4.1 states that the Board of Directors shall consist of 5 directors. We're looking for a little latitude here as we kind of work on PUD improvements at this stage without having other Board of Directors members appointed. So we just have the 3 board members which represent the agency on the Board of Directors, which is myself, Commissioner Metz, and Commissioner Mandel.
Will it ever return to 5 board members at a later date, or?
We hope so when we get development teams on board and kind of the development's populated and up to speed, yes.
So this is just to expedite
Yes,
decision-making?
to address some issues we're having on the front end.
Okay.
Danielle?
Yes, it's really just for consistency. In the articles, we appointed 3, and the bylaws were requiring 5, so it's really just to allow the 3 that we have appointed
It
to
makes
act.
sense. Yeah.
So it doesn't mean you can't have 5 now. This is somewhere between 3 and 5, so.
Right.
Any other comment, questions? We need a motion.
I'll make a motion to amend the Atlas Waterfront bylaws, the Waterfront Association amendment to the bylaws.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Should we check and see if Commissioner Arman is on Zoom?
I think I just heard something, but. Mick, are you out there?
Yes, I am here. I am on Zoom.
How about Brad? Thanks, Mick.
Next up, Mr. Chairman, is like to invite Phil Boyd up to talk about the Atlas Project and a few other initiatives.
Mr. Boyd?
Members, thank you. Let's see here. Maybe I'll wait for Jeff to share screen, or do I need to do
Nope,
that?
you have control now.
Oh,
It's like the old days.
okay. Okay, first I'll apologize for how lengthy the presentation is tonight, because there's a lot of topics to cover, as you guys probably saw in the multiple memos in your packet. So the first thing I'll start with is just an update on the two phases that are currently underway. Phase 1, Veneer Road curb work is starting February 21st or 28th. That Veneer Road is up in here. The board might recall, La Riviere was prepared to do a bunch of this work when this area was awarded to the Butler team. Butler wanted to put in an alley through here, so we stopped work so he could reconfigure this. So the work those streets have wintered over. And now, as the weather's getting better, La Riviere's available to move in there and start getting some of that work done. Sidewalks will follow, and then paving should be in mid-April when the plants open up. In phase 2, we've excavated to stockpile about 100,000 yards of material in pit 1. And so that's pretty much complete. For the most part, the material's been excavated out of there. It's been filled in to about 30,000 yards. To give the board some perspective, when we excavated that area that's right in here, pit 1, it started up high, but our finished grade is down here. So that's why we excavated 100,000 yards, but we'll put back about 40,000 yards. That was intentional because we're trying to balance the earthwork on the site, meaning we ended up at 0, which we won't end up at 0, but that's the objective. Pit 2, excavated to stockpile about 40,000 yards. The work there, and this will weave into some of our discussion on the Ramsey pit. When the MOU got approved by the city and Ignite and the Transportation Department, Tommy and I had been talking, Tommy's here if you guys happen to have questions for him, had been talking about if that happens, can he retool his operation to slow down a little bit in excavating to stockpile? Because if he excavates unsuitable to stockpile and it eventually goes to Ramsey Pit, he's got to pick it up again and then haul it. So he's touching it twice. So he's retooled his operations, slowed down a little bit to see what will happen here in an effort to, instead of excavate to stockpile, he excavates to haul to Ramsey Pit if the board elects to move forward, because it results in some cost savings, as you'll see here a little bit later. It also results in maybe being a little bit behind schedule, but it's not a material impact. La Riviere will be starting sewer on Monday in this area here on Lumber Lane. That was also paused because Toll Brothers wanted to put bathrooms in their basements, is what I'll call it. And we didn't anticipate that would happen. So we paused for them to allow us to redesign the sewer through there and make sure everything was coordinated. It's a little bit unusual, but I guess it's okay. It's their house.
Phil, question?
Yes, sir.
On your previous page, on that one, the stuff that you're excavating to stockpile, that's all undesirable soils?
Correct. There's two parts to it. The overburden, we'll call it, that comes off the top is a mixture of soil, topsoil and rock. And then, you help me segue. The area below it is bark. So this is bark all down in here. This is actually in pit 2. I'm standing here, Tommy and I were out there after the construction meeting this morning. We're standing on Lumber Lane looking, so we're standing right here, looking that direction in this picture. And this material is just getting hauled, goes up on top here and gets stockpiled up on top. He's doing a little bit of work in here, but the number of trucks he's running has been cut back because he can't just completely send his crews home. This is an image of pit 1. So this has been excavated down and it's been being filled back up. Southeast Way is over here. This is the northwest edge of the pit. And you can see just the last remnants in this area that are coming out of that area. This is, if you're into this kind of stuff, this is kind of cool. I was asking Tommy that this dozer is pushing the scraper here because the material is so loose that in order to get, he bogs down in there. So the scraper comes through, he slows way down, and then the dozer comes in behind him and rear ends him and pushes him out of the hole. So anyway, that's the bottom part of pit 1.
That must be cool for engineers.
It is, especially when you're a kid who grew up seeing that stuff. So Tommy and I like this kind of things. It is cool. This is a picture of the finished part of area. It's this area right here, 19. So we're kind of standing right in this area, looking in that direction. The reason I took it is just, you guys can see the size of the unsuitable material up here. This is another view of, you can see bark, and then on top of it is a layer of unsuitable soils. Tommy's trying to make an effort to kind of keep them segregated. So when we get ready to haul them, if the board authorizes that, we've got them in a way that we can efficiently move them. You guys have seen this before. I was telling Tony and Danielle earlier today that you might recall the weird fencing that was in here before. There's quite a drop off on the other side of this. So Dell had some fencing in here, and it's always been bothering me because I thought it was, I didn't bring a picture of the old one, but it looked very 1970-ish. And I told Dell it looked strange, and can't we do something different? And so that's the proposed fencing panels that go in there. We have to have something there. It's budgeted. I just wanted the board to take one more look at it and not surprise you guys, because the image you saw before was a little bit different. This has not changed, but those have changed.
And that's metal?
It is, yep.
Metal.
Yep, the whole structure is concrete, artificial or stone or steel. And it's powder coated, so this is not Corten. There's some Lexan in here that lights up, that's backlit. Okay, the big topic, Mount Hink to Ramsey Pit. So what's been accomplished since the January board meeting? We did get the ITD City Ignite MOU signed around. Board might remember it was originally an ITD Ignite MOU, and ITD insisted that the city be a signatory to it. So we went to City Council. While we were at City Council, we asked them the question, gosh, can we use the Prairie Trail to save $1 million? And they said no. You have to use the city streets. So we can dig into that if you'd like. So we've been moving forward with that. We've designed a new Ramsey pit access that I can show you a picture if you like. And then the site design is about 90% complete because the board authorized that work last month, and it has to be an attachment to the MOU for ITD. So that work is nearly complete. And then Tommy and I have been going back and forth on negotiations if the board's going to consider awarding an extension to Le Riviere's contract, and that's what I'll walk the board through next. I threw this in here just to give you guys a reminder. The yellow route is what we wanted to do. The red route is what we're left with, which is also going to force us into using a little bit of this segment of road here as well. Not just Southeast Way, but we're going to end up using Suzanne. The entire objective of the project is to take what was unusable, it was recreational space, I shouldn't say it was unusable, and potentially convert it into development space. This is one scenario, and this is kind of a traditional standard size lot similar to the other lots in the Atlas development, townhomes up here along Southeast Way. This is a higher density option, kind of in the background of our minds. Is there a essential professional housing potential there? If the board decides to move forward with this, that will be a whole other discussion for you guys to have because it affects the economics here. So the economics that are presented here, which you guys have seen this at the last meeting, we're now on option 1. This is the projected cost to move Mount Hink, $5.1 million. We're going to go in and develop this scenario potentially, and then end up selling it for $6 million. And so you end up in the hole $69,000. And that, at this magnitude and current estimate, that's kind of a plus or minus number. So that's where we're currently at.
So the road that we did not anticipate being on, does that have to be reconstructed at all after using it? It's going to be fine and no additional cost there? Okay.
Yeah, that's our intention anyway. Now, I should caveat a lot of this discussion. You know, we've had discussions with everybody, ITD, City of Coeur d'Alene, street staff, city leadership, permitting agencies, done all those discussions. As soon as the rubber hits the road, as we know, and the public gets a view of this, there's lots of things that can happen. I think as the council member and former mayor know, there's lots of phones that can start ringing. We're not sure what the implications of that are. We've tried to budget for it with traffic control devices and try to mitigate those things, but we're not exactly certain what might happen. For instance was, from an economic standpoint, we were trying to burn brush up here, which is completely permitted by the city. It's acceptable. La Riviera was doing it correctly. The neighbors got upset, and it was shut down for what we call political reasons. You could have just forced it, but Tommy was in the mode that just said, look, I don't want to be a bad neighbor, and he just stopped burning it. So there's those types of things that we may encounter moving forward. So this is the big thing I wanted to make sure that the board was up to speed on, that this prospect is less than a break-even proposition if you move forward with the contract. By the time you move all the dirt, entitle the land, and sell it at the estimated market value, you'll be in the hole by $69,000. This does not include the tax increment, of course, and there's an estimate of it I put down here for reference if you were to look at it over the next 15 years. And again, that's based on this configuration. A different configuration would result in a different number. So when Tommy and I started down the path of negotiating, and you guys have this in your memo, these are the numbers that were originally rolled out. When you're negotiating rates, we have a certain access to data. I'm not in his business, and I'm used to advertising for stuff for bid, and I get a number in, and that's how we ground truth commodity type numbers like this. But you have a general idea of what does a dump truck go for, how long does it take the dump truck to get from point A to point B, and then there's all these other potential risks that we want to protect our client for. We want to balance the risk, but we want to transfer as much risk as possible to the contractor and minimize the risk to the board. So when we started here, you see like we have soil material and bark and sawdust as two different unit prices here. Well, you can imagine if the soil material goes off the charts at a higher haul rate, the price goes up. So Tommy and I eventually worked through and got to a negotiated rate here where it's just one rate regardless of what gets hauled. That lowers the board's risk to what type of soil is out there. So we've worked through several other items in there. A lot of it was in the memo. Once we figured out that we were forced to go on road, I was trying to think of how do I further reduce the board's risk, because this makes me nervous. If this number goes up, that number gets more red, and that's not a good place to be. And so Tommy and I have spent a fair amount of time walking through stuff, and I should say he's been a very good negotiator partner on one hand and very firm on other components. So we've done our best to come to an agreement here. You guys have these in the memo here. Some of the big ones are, regardless of what he encounters in that mountain and down through these historic pits over here, and there used to be a concrete facility over here, a precast concrete facility. Regardless of what he comes across, he's going to put it in a truck and haul it to the Ramsey pit. If it's too big to haul, he'll break it down. When stuff gets broken down, concrete, it can't go into a typical truck. It's got to go into one that is a little bit more beat up. You haul smaller pieces, it costs more for him to do that. That was a pretty good win on our part. He agreed to no escalation in the fuel, provided he gets going. Some of these other ones in here, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 3, 4, and 5 really have to do with site soil management. If he's in control of both operations and we come across things, structural soils, we can say, hey, don't haul that to Ramsey because we think we might want to use that here. So there's some nice flexibility in there. He can't take the soil, the structural soil, and sell it to somebody. That's another thing that we would not want to have happen. So we negotiated through those terms. So when you boil it down, where we're at for the board's consideration here is, do you want to move forward with the project? His contract price is $4,915,000, which is right here. If you do move forward with it, tied to that is a contract amendment for us, where we're going to be doing the construction observation, quantity tracking, surveying, all the services that I've outlined in your memo. So that's one question for the board. There's been some additional developments here just in the last day or so that might modify the way that the soils go into the Ramsey pit. I'm not sure if it's going to come to fruition. Right now, we expect all the sawdust to go in and all the soil to go in. It's possible for permitting reasons we may have to mix them together. If we have to mix them together, that's potentially another $150,000, $200,000, $225,000 operation to do that. As I was talking to Tony about that today, he suggested, well, let's present to the board the idea if they want to put in a contingency to this contract, if you decide to move forward, that Chairman Hoskins would be the adjudicator of those items. And so that's one item for the board's consideration, or the board could just say, look, just go put the thing out to bid and let's find a number, what the market currently says. So I know I've thrown a ton of stuff at you guys, so I'm going to pause right there if there's questions.
Mr. Chairman? Phil, who makes the determination on the mixing of those items?
That's an excellent question. The short story, without getting way into the weeds on this thing, is the sawdust material, it can be classified as a landfill material. So if you look through, at least our layperson's reading of Idaho statutes say that if you put it in a hole, it's a landfill, just pure sawdust. That kicks us into a potential permitting challenge or category that might slow the project down. As I thought about it, and I talked to Tony and Danielle about this, well, what if we just mix them together? Because really we're taking an organic product that might be 40% sawdust and mixing it with 60% soil. So now we just have a soil mixture. And so that soil mixture is not classified, in my opinion, as a landfill product because it's sawdust and soil. And so we could mix it together and put it in the hole. That would be one of the questions where once we get out of this board meeting, or once we get, a few days down the road, once we figure out a definitive path, there'll be path one, let's head down the regulatory path, try to get it classified as an acceptable landfill, which could take months, weeks, or years to do, or do we just go mix the soils together and put it in the ground? I don't know if that made sense, because there's a lot of nuances in there.
It does.
So, again, who makes the determination whether you have to mix it or not?
The landfill statutes in Kootenai County are regulated by Panhandle Health District. So what we intend to do is Danielle's going to do some code analysis and kind of read through the code, give me some guidance, and likely what I'll do is go to the health district and say, hey, here's what we're doing. We're going to mix these two products together and put them in this hole. What we would prefer to do is put them in the hole this way, a layer of sawdust and a layer of soil, because it's better for all these reasons. The sawdust stays anaerobic, you have lower settlement, it's more cost effective, doesn't really cause any problems. But if you, PhD, send us down this 6-month permitting rule, we don't have time for that. We're just going to go mix the soils and put them in the ground. So that's the way we were kind of strategizing, or not maybe.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm getting at is that one person may have a different opinion, and if we get an opinion that we don't necessarily like, do we have the ability to ask for someone else to look at it?
You could, and all of that takes time. And those are the things that, as Tony and I were thinking about how do we manage this, is do we just build into this contract the flexibility to head down that path? Well, then we can present it to Chairman Hoskins. Maybe he pulls the board and says, hey, we didn't get the answer here. We want to bucket up the food chain to Boise. It's going to take an extra 3 weeks. We may still get the same bad answer. Or do we just head down this path of mixing the soils to get it done?
Yeah, I guess I would like to push as hard as we can and as quick as we can to save that amount of money. And one person's opinion may not be the right opinion.
Yep, and there's a lot of good science behind what we're proposing to do of isolating that organic material and a deep layer and keeping it anaerobic so oxygen can't get to it, and it reduces how much degradation occurs.
Phil, you might just also want to share with the board about the long-term viability of the site for the future potential owner.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the other potential impact is once you isolate that organic layer, you put it all in there, you squish it down as much as you can, and then you load it with another big layer of soil on top of it, it further compresses it. And at some point, it gets to this point where it stops compressing, and since there's no oxygen getting to it, it really won't start to degrade very fast. Because we do this like when we're doing lightweight soil construction, we built airports on sawdust, roadways, and they'll last a very long time, but you kind of get to this stable point. If we end up having to mix it, now you've got organic material in layers that are getting oxygen to them, and they will degrade over time, which results in more settlement. If you intend to build a field on that, you want the former design with a layered cake, so you have reduced settlement versus a mixed up cake where you have more settlement. So that's the other good reason, Commissioner Woodmeyer, to push hard on that option to build the layered cake.
We don't want a sponge cake, then.
No sponge cake.
Phil, on your slide there, you have an or.
Right.
So my concern about, again, a lot of the reasons we're doing this is we'd like to haul this now before the summer gets here and get this project done, or
Right.
get that, at least the hauling part done. Going out to a bid, wouldn't that be very disadvantageous for that?
So I had thrown just a few bullet points, and many of these will be familiar to you guys because you've been down this road before bidding things. And, maybe the bid pricing is lower, maybe it's not. Tommy and I had this discussion. He said, if we have to put it out to bid, we'll bid on it. And the numbers I gave you here are the numbers you're going to get when I bid on it. What we won't take advantage of or won't have advantage is the time, because we'll spend 3 or 4 weeks by the time we advertise it for a bid, open the bids, you guys review them, and then you have the award time too. So even after you award it, contractors have 10 days to put in their contracts. So we might have 5 or 6 weeks that the delay happens, that pushes this off. So
At minimum.
If this went to a different bidder, you would lose the synergies you have with Tommy right now, too. So honestly, in my opinion, I would say you're better sticking with Tommy.
And that's a very good point. In synergies, is I like that. I'm going to steal that because that is what's happening. And those are kind of the items that I talked about earlier here. Is we're able to be, because we're working on lots of parts of the project together. We're able to.
You communicate well, too.
Yeah, and we did some of it today when we were out there. That had to do with RFP 5. Tommy's blowing and going, and he wants to finish RFP 5, but we don't want him to paint the board into a corner on some of the work that we have done. And so I've been coaxing him we're going to have to isolate this and slow down a little bit on that area, because we want to give you guys the maximum flexibility to choose product type up there that is what you want.
It also makes sense, the data that you have to show to PhD, it would be hard for them to say, don't do it this way. I don't see how they could without any scientific data or any facts to back it up.
I totally agree with you, but
But it could happen.
yeah, yep. Sometimes
We'd
science
also lose
doesn't
the
prevail.
cost-saving option of excavate the hull.
How much is it?
No, we would lose that.
Yes, sir.
At
Yes.
approximately 100,000.
Yes, right, this one right here.
Commissioner Mandel.
Oh, just that, I was gonna ask, even if there was a cost savings by putting it out to bid, there would be a delay in time, but I would assume there's a pretty steep learning curve to understand the site and where to, dump it in a pit, and just that agility of being able to make decisions if you're familiar with the area and the materials already. So if I were bidding on it, I'm not in this field, I would want a lot more information or a lot more time, because they're gonna wanna protect themselves, right? They're gonna wanna put the risk back on us, not on them. So I feel like there's a opportunity cost and time cost by putting it out to bid, not only on the front end, but also on the back end.
That's a good point, and there's 2 kids in the sandbox issue too. Right now, the Riviera is the only kid in the sandbox, and if we put in another kid in the sandbox, sometimes they play nice together and sometimes they don't. You know, and we can write specifications and rules till the cows come home. And I've done that before, but when contractors want to behave badly, they do.
And I don't think the savings would justify the disruption. Huh.
So not to go off topic, but I think for me, a bigger question has been around the $1 million that we're losing out on. And I didn't get a chance to see the city council meeting, so my apologies, but did they offer up any offsets for that million? Because in the long term, it's also tax increment that could be a cost benefit to the community, that where we could be doing some public improvements as well. So I just wanted to hear.
No
We have
offsets were offered.
We have a council member that wishes to talk about that.
Well, I'm willing
Put him
to.
on the spot.
You know, it was not lost on me. Now, I guess, you know, I'm in a different perspective. Sometimes I've got mostly my urban renewal hat on, sometimes, you know, more my council hat, and kind of mix the two. As I went to that meeting, and I even mentioned during our deliberation that, you know, I came in thinking, you know, it made most sense to go the trail route and to, you know, both save the money and some timing. It was not lost on me that sometimes some of our council, well, one of them, if we're talking about urban renewal money and if it fits the agenda, that's our taxpayer money. But in this case, you know, when somebody brought up, well, would be losing $1 million, the response was, oh, well, that's just Ignite's money. So we don't really have to worry about it. And I'm thinking, well, it's, and I ended up, you know, going with the rest of the council, that hearing everything, and the reality is no, you know, it makes more sense, or at least agreed with going with Ramsey Road. But some of the reality is they acted kind of like, oh, well, now we've just avoided this whole problem because we're not going to be on the trail and the trail users won't be upset. But I mentioned, and I would in this, that going on Ramsey Road is going to be a big deal still. And in my mind, well, and back to the $1 million, in my mind, kind of the trade-off, and if it ends up being kind of a wash, I still think the fact of getting Mount Hink out of there, having more spaces that we turn into habitable housing, I mean, the net gain is still very much there, and we get to recoup down the road some tax increment. So in my mind, even if it's all a wash, you know, the bare economics, I think for other reasons, it still makes sense. But as far as the timing, I think, you know, time is of the essence on this, and you know, keep it moving. So
Start hauling.
that's my thing. Because there's still going to be stuff we don't anticipate now. I mean, there's going to be some hue and cry from the public that all of us are going to have to deal with a bit. But the sooner we do it, when I saw somewhere in there the thing of, gee, then it might go through August or something, it's like, oh, no, man, no. So.
Anything else? I'd like to see all those RVs mixed with dump trucks.
Phil, one question on the Ramsey entrance approach, that cost doubled in the new pricing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because of the option that is being taken?
It's because of, there's two things that are happening here, and maybe more. Originally, when we had this is a drawing of that. So this is a little atypical. North is to the left instead of being up. Ramsey Road is down here. When we had originally put this in here and we were doing preliminary estimates on it, I kind of had in my mind, we're going to come in here, take this curb and a sidewalk and out. We'll build to this point right here, and run gravel the rest of the way in and be done with it. As we started working through it with ITD's like, well, we're worried about security and our gate and so on, and what about dust, and how are you guys gonna off track, and what happens when a lost citizen gets in here and they're driving around in this gravel and they get into our. So as we went through there, we started, how do you solve the problem? Sometimes you work through it, and the other times you throw money at it. And I don't say that in a flippant way, but we ended up coming in here, we added a gate in here for ITDs. Tommy has more temporary gate in here. We're putting temporary gate and eventually permanent gate, because that was part of the deal with ITD, is we've got to permanently isolate, and then we're paving this section in here as well. That was part of the back and forth with ITD. The board might remember that at one point, ITD said, if you fix our right turn problem, city, we would look at figuring out how to transfer this land to you. We've fixed their right turn problem here. And so it did double. And there's some fill in here that we had to do because Tommy's guys have got to come out this way now, and there's quite a dip there. So that's kind of the general background to it.
Thank you. It's a good solution.
The one other thing about this, just so the board knows kind of the thought that went into this is a 25-mile-an-hour drop ride. So if you, and the vehicle that can go in there, if you think about the big fuel trucks that drop fuel at a gas station, the big long ones, that design vehicle can be driving 25 miles an hour and drop into here. And the whole purpose behind that was to not back up traffic on Ramsey Road. And so Tommy's belly dumps, if those are big long ones as well, or side dumps, when he comes in here, his guys won't have to slow down much, and they'll just be able to drop right in there, come through here, dump, and then exit out either this way, or there's another exit up here that he may use.
So they'll have to come out, come down, hit Ramsey, and go left to get back.
Yeah, they may also, they're considering splitting the exit, so they may turn eastbound on Marie, go up to Julia, turn southbound on Julia, and then to be able to split how many vehicles are going to the signals, because the signals are where the jam up is going to occur. So I know Tommy goes out and sits and looks at this and thinks about it, because he came up with that idea one day. He called and says, we got to figure out if I can use Julia, which we have worked out with the city and talked that through with them.
How are you going to pave that if the plants aren't open? And you start hauling tomorrow?
We won't pave this until the end.
Okay.
You know, we could have pushed back a little bit on ITD, but we were trying to get them to move forward. And this was one of those items that when we kind of said, what if we go do all this for you? Oh gosh, that really solves a problem for us. And they've been really good. We met out there with them the other day, and Damon's, Alan's crew and folks have been really good to work with on this. And we're helping them solve a challenge that they have.
And on that partnership front, I mean, this new ingress and egress to their site there will allow their salt trucks and their brine trucks, those big trucks, to have better access into the site. So this is really a benefit to ITD, and it's part of the negotiation and partnership project.
And it removes them from Marie right here where they currently, I think I told the board how they clog up traffic there now, that they'll just continue north.
That's great. Thank you.
So being that road there is outside of our district, so who's paying for that?
There's really no issue with that. It's just part of the relocation process and kind of preparing the pit for delivery. So we're fine.
Thank you. So you're waiting for our action now?
Questions? They're all big numbers, and
Additional questions or a motion?
You're looking for individual motions for A and B?
I would look for a motion, if the board would so choose, to move forward on, if you choose to go forward with the Livrier contract and the Welch-Comer contract amendments as presented.
As one motion?
As one motion, yeah.
I would make that motion to move ahead with Tommy and the transfer materials to ITD Ramsey Road site, including the contract amendments for Tommy and Welch-Comer.
Oh, Jim, I was thinking that we probably should, just in my opinion, not to change your motion, but add the contingency.
Add the contingency. I agree. I agree. The the contingency is included in the motion. The 5% contingency, $245,750, decided on by Chairman Hoskins, if needed.
I'd second that.
Further discussion?
That was wordy. Sorry about that.
Is there a have to be completed date by?
Yeah, so there's, the way that the have to be completed date is once the hauling starts and the number of trucks starts, and this is another one of the, I didn't list it in there. We're classifying the types of trucks Tommy's using. X number of super dumps, X number of tin-wheelers, smaller than super dumps, X number of side dumps. So we know what those are. He has a little bit of flexibility to change those if something breaks down. The thing I didn't want to get into is, we agree, you're going to use X number of super dumps, then he gets some other job, and all of a sudden, all we see is tin-wheelers. Because then the number of trucks has to go up, which causes bigger traffic issues. So we will agree on that. We'll agree on a 4-month haul time, assuming he's allowed to work 16 hours a day. If some issue causes him to not be able to do that out of his control, then we're going to have to renegotiate the time frame, which I think the board can appreciate that. He's planning to work 2 shifts and do those things, but if the politics of the world change that.
Understood.
Do we know that no other construction projects in that area are going to interfere? Like road, not related to Atlas, but it's construction season, and when you talk about things outside of his control, if there's something going up on Apple Way, is it going to?
There's actually one of our projects that is in this vicinity that we're working on taking out of that window, seeing if we can't reschedule it so it doesn't impact the project.
Okay.
Because it would materially impact it,
Yeah.
but no, we're not aware of any other ones in that area. The city, we talked to them about it. ITD talked through them about it. Do they have anything weird going on in their facility? Because sometimes they have trucks coming in and out of their facilities, contractors store stuff there. As far as we know, there's not.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions or anything? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to add one thing, and I don't want to back up too far to what Dan was saying, but there was a comment made about the Prairie Trail, and that how could we just basically let the Prairie Trail get all ripped up? But that comment was made without digging into the fact that in our budget, it was to repave all of the.
Yeah.
And Golf Course Road.
I was a little disappointed that it went that route. You never get what you want sometimes, but
So was that not clarified then?
It was, the Ironman was a big issue, I think, that people that are training on,
well, it
that came up a
was-
couple
it was-
times.
The other issue was the marathon, that it would affect the marathon. Well, this project is scheduled to be completed 2 to 3 weeks prior to the marathon. Whether they were thought that maybe delays would go into that or not, but anyway, it didn't go the way I wanted it to, but
And the marathon director was there and was supportive of this and was saying if we need to, we can work with it. And actually, yes, the other alternative that we didn't go, had some permanent enhancements that would be some good things for the trail and off, I think, on the other side of the freeway, some different things that would be some long-term advantage, but wasn't enough to come close to carrying the day. So-
too, if you want to do the math about the number of people that are going to be inconvenienced from not being able to use that trail versus the people that drive that road, I think one is substantially higher.
Absolutely.
I was surprised
You
too.
might get a call from me when I have to figure out how to get my kid to charter now.
There you go.
No-brainer.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's, we'll move forward.
And there's still time, and if we start and the city reconsiders their thinking, maybe that happens. Tommy and I have talked about that as well, and he's ready to be flexible.
Safety was a big issue for me, and the route that's been chosen is a lot riskier route because you have to have the barricades and you have traffic going, bicycles. The other didn't. So maybe safety brought to council might
Yeah, I'm not sure what might
know.
motivate them to change their mind.
We've
but-
got a path
Yeah.
chosen.
Yeah, okay.
I'm disappointed that
An
the,
expensive path.
the conveyor belt idea didn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah,
Oh, well,
We chased the mayor, yeah.
that was a good idea.
So moving on to the next item, the board might remember back in October, we were looking at, we had brought forward a proposal from Laurier to do site manager work. And you might remember this, what this comes out of is, Laurier's in there working, there's all these subcontractors in there working on the houses, doing things, damaging infrastructure that's being built, generally making a mess of the site. And we're trying to wrangle them. And the wrangling wasn't going well because there's not a lot of authority that LaRiviere has over them. And we were just having a challenge. So we moved forward with this idea of a site manager. The number was pretty big. The board decided to table it. Since that time, LaRiviere's moved out of some of those areas. The contractors have become a little more disciplined because now the streets are opened and Todd Fuser, the streets and engineering department head, has gotten involved and flexed a little city muscle. So we're getting a little better cooperation. So some of those issues have toned down a little bit. Now we're starting to move into the issues of where's my mailbox? Why is there noise? Because people are moving in there. And then there's just general coordination issues. I've been thinking about this, and I had mentioned to Tony, we've got an inspector down there. We're going to end up having 2 inspectors down there, or 1.5, because when Tommy puts 2 pipe crews on, we're going to have 2 inspectors down there. And I started thinking, well, maybe we should look at providing site manager options, because we know the players ahead of time. We know Toll Brothers, we know DeChase, we know all these guys, and we can start setting the tone when we're the A&E and DDA phase. So I suggested that to Tony, what do you think about that? And he says, yeah, let's advance that to the board and see what they think about it. So that's kind of the origin of this idea. If you guys said, we want LaRiviere to do it, I'm completely fine with it, because I don't know that I'm thrilled with the idea of doing it. But both of us, both LaRiviere and our firms, suffer because there's not somebody there doing it. And we end up having to clean up messes that with a little bit of proactive communication, we could have avoided the mess. And that's what this would accomplish, is I can assign a person to it and have them chasing down people, starting communication channels right off the get-go, establishing the rules before they even show up and start turning dirt. And it would save us a lot of headaches that we're currently dealing with now, after the fact.
I'd love to hear everybody else's thoughts, but of course, the 5,000 a month sounds better. But I also think, because from a construction management perspective, I think that makes sense to me.
Who's going to come up with the rules you just mentioned?
I had started putting them together when LaRiviere was looking at it. One evening, I just sat down and I was banging out the rules. So I've already written the rules. I gave them to Tommy and said, because he needed to have a scope of work on what he was going to enforce. Plus, I wanted something to be able to hand to the builders, the developers, the Toll Brothers, the DeChases, the Atlas Building Groups, and say, this is what we expect, how we expect you to behave. Ignite expects you to behave. We're just your guys' agent. It's in their interest to do that as well, because they can be interrupted by their neighbor behaving badly. So if everybody tries to work together, we can keep things smoother. And just having somebody to call. When Mrs. Jones is upset about the noise, she can call Eric on my staff, and Eric can go out there and talk to her, and she's not calling Chris Bosley or Todd or Troy Thomason or Tony. That's kind of the idea of being proactive about it.
Do you need some input for those rules? Because we have some good rule followers here. We could probably have help.
Totally, and I can send out to the board. Tony's seen it before, but I can take it and we would formalize it. We'll add some more things that as we live with it, they've turned into.
If you get a draft to Tony, he can send it out to us for
Yeah.
review.
One of the comments I have, Mr. Chairman, is that if the board wants to go down this path, is that we probably just need to think of a time when we want to start this activity, and then probably have some type of time frame in there when we do kind of migrate to the HOA management about if Ignite or Watchcoma gives like a 30-day notice to the other member that, we can kind of end this agreement, but we just probably need some of those metrics in an action if you want to move forward with this.
Good point.
Yep.
Well, I think the concept we've talked before, and you need an enforcer, and this makes sense, the fact that the price has come down a bit, but having somebody who's already active in it and nobody's going to know what better the rules should be than you're dealing with it. So, yeah, I think, and for everybody involved, the potential new customers and the city, that's a, but again, with some time limits.
Did you have something else, Olivia? Mr. Mayor, ex-mayor?
Tony, I was just wondering if we made a motion, because between you and Tommy and Phil, you guys are most involved in that. If we made a motion to have the executive director work with the engineering firm and the contractor to establish a start date with the idea of transitioning to an HOA manager as soon as possible? Because I don't know that we can give specific dates.
Yeah.
It would be difficult for us to make specific dates unless you felt that was necessary.
So I think the only specific date I would be looking for would be a start date.
Yeah.
And we can kind of, like you suggest, Commissioner, is just kind of work to when we transition from Welch-Comer over to the HOA when that timing is right.
So my question for Phil would be, is March 1? Is that a date you're looking for?
Yeah, that'd be great, because we'll start putting stuff together now. And we'll start being prepared to be able to get after it, but March 1 would work great.
I'd make a motion to approve the site manager option with Welch-Comer with a start date of March 1 and ask the executive director to work with LaRiviere and Welch-Comer on a transition as soon as possible to an HOA.
I second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, so the last one, which this one is particularly frustrating to me, but because it always seems to ebb and flow. The board might remember the Riverside lift station down here, because there was a fair amount of angst about spending $35,000 on a standby
yeah.
generator. And so just the short story, the Atlas wastewater drains in two directions. Some of it drains to the west, and some of it drains to the east. When we were designing the system, you work through this process of figuring out how shallow to be able to put the sewer in, because the deeper you go in construction of the sewer, the more expensive it is. So we go through these elaborate design efforts to minimize how much capital the board's putting out to bury the sewer lines, and it results in a certain amount flowing this way and a certain amount flowing to the west. So once we figured that out, the city of Coeur d'Alene said, well, what's the impact on our sewer lift station? So we did an analysis of that, which you guys saw that in your packet. And it essentially required one of two things. We had to deepen the wet well, which essentially means building a new lift station, or putting in a standby generator, because that will accomplish the same thing if there's a power outage. Because what you want with a bigger wet well is if there's a power outage, the wastewater can fill up in there, and it gives time for the city to respond. So we went down that path, put the generator in. That's the most cost-effective option. And then as we started digging into it, Avista says, well, gosh, these bushes are in the way. We got to get those out of here. Well, those bushes belong to the HOA, and they need to be there in order to meet the PUD requirements, to obscure things, and on it goes. Pretty soon we need a different gas meter. We lose our electrical contractor who was going to do the work. The replacement guy is more expensive. We try to get different people to come and look at it. No one wants to touch it. And so that's why it's frustrating to me, because we can't get people to look at this. We finally coerced Tommy to come in and do the flat work and the landscaping work, which I don't know that he particularly wants to do it, because it's a small project and it's just a challenge to do. Anyway, the long story short, the board originally authorized $55,000 for the project. We have all these additional costs that have now piled up. So now the project's $120,000, which is an additional $65,000. I don't know how to avoid these. We've tried, and done the best that we can, but that's where we're currently at. And I'm glad to answer questions about that.
There's an alternative, is there?
The alternative is way more expensive.
Right.
Yeah, is to go deep in the wet well. I will say that, again, like on a lot of the parts of the project, the wastewater department, Larry Parsons' group has been really great to work with. You know, they've come in and said, well, we can do this and we'll help do that. And so they're mitigating some of the costs, you know, resulting in some savings here. But there's still this expense here. One of the things I will point out, though, is that what we did negotiate with all these people except Avista and I guess Avista and the generator is we're working on a T&M basis because we're getting these gigantic numbers out of them and we can't fathom why are they so big. But there's enough uncertainty with them. And so finally what we've done with these guys is moved to time and materials basis because we believe it's going to be less than this maximum here. Because they're just, well, if Avista doesn't show up, then this happens, and all these if-then problems.
Do you think it'll be $65,000 less than anticipated?
No. It might be, you know, $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000 less, but not 65,000.
We just approved 4.9 million.
Mr. Chairman, so I just had a question not pertaining to the cost of it. When you said that the wastewater, some of it flows to the west?
Yep.
Just for my clarification, how does it then come, because it has to come back the other way, right?
It does. So what happens is the wastewater flows through here, through the new sewer line over to Grand Mill Drive. It goes into a lift station at Grand Mill Drive. Next time you drive in there where the road splits, there's a nice landscape area. There's a lift station back in there. And that lift station pumps the wastewater up into a gravity line that then gravities back this way.
So it goes west and then it comes back.
It goes east, yeah. It's worn out by the time it gets to the wastewater treatment plant.
Mileage plan.
So just a question, so the point of this whole thing is if there's a very large event and a lot of water comes to the storm water system, I mean, that's what this is dealing with?
If there's a power outage,
Yeah.
during, what happens is, you know, the wastewater doesn't
Right,
stop
yeah,
flowing.
yeah.
People, because you guys have a gravity
Yeah.
water system, so people can still flush their toilets when the power is out, because you have big storage tanks. So the wastewater continues to flow. Here, what will happen is the genset will say, oh, golly gee, the power is out, I'm going to turn on. So it will start itself up and be ready to power up the pumps.
Right. Well, it seems like in the really big picture in terms of benefit to the public or potentially avoiding a problem, that having an actual backup generator that's going to push us through versus just, well, a bigger, it sounds like, container
Yeah.
that still maybe might overflow or something. So I think in the big picture, it's probably still, I mean, justified, or I guess I would ask you, as engineering, is it better to, is there a better way? I mean, is the backup actual generator versus just nature?
This is a better option. I mean, the perfect option would be if you could gravity flow all the way to the wastewater
Yeah.
treatment plant. That's not possible. This is the city's preferred option.
Yeah, okay.
And it's more cost effective and it's more, it provides continuous service. It doesn't ever fill up the wet well like you're pointing
Yeah.
out.
Kind of protects the system.
Completely, yeah.
Well, I will make a motion to approve the Riverside Sewer Lift Station.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Might I add that we set a not-to-exceed number? You know, it'd be great if the number could come in at $120,150.16. But given what Phil has just shared, we might want to give a not-to-exceed number in that motion.
I'll amend my motion to not to exceed is the additional, should it be the 120 or those 65? Because
I
Like the
might
120?
suggest maybe 125,000.
Yeah.
$120,150.16.
125, you said?
120.
125, he said.
125 even.
See, I wanted to do the 16 cents.
And does the second approve?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, motion carries.
Well, thank you for laboring through that with me. I'm glad to answer any questions if you guys have anything else.
Thanks, Phil.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Lots going on down there.
Thanks, Tommy.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Tony. Next on the agenda is board commissioner comments. Any board commissioner comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Jeff, that's a wrap. Thanks, Mick.